We move to the panel time. So Charles Maxwell, Gin Guild board member, Thames Distillers, legend in the industry. Would you like to? I'll hand over to you, Charles.
Thanks very much, Ed. Good morning, everybody. If we introduce the panel, to my right is Cherry, who is a journalist and judge on the IWSC.
Lots of competitions,
And to the right there is Gavin from Diageo, he's the technical man, aren't you, Gavin, really?
Yes, working in the lab. Yeah.
Right. On my left is a gentleman who you might recognise if you stayed awake a little bit earlier. Fellow board member, used to hitting me quite. And at the end is Nate, who knows a little bit about serving gin. I think he's got a bar in somewhere in the city, haven't you, Nate?
You're never out of it, you'd know.
Right, and we're here really as a panel to open the discussion on the presentation given by Justin a little bit earlier. And if I may, to start it off, if I could turn to you, Cherry. That's the first time you'll have seen it.
Yep.
What did you make of it? Do you think, is this something we need, or is this really completely, we've been sitting around enjoying ourselves, drinking a few gins and come up with a sort of half-daft idea?
I'm personally not fully convinced. I've got quite a few questions that will hopefully expand on it and develop as we go. I think the point that you made about brands really paying attention to what they actually write on their label is really important, and just simply listing botanicals isn't enough to convey a message to the end consumer, so I think that's really important to look at. But I do kind of worry with the bar chart that you've really got to pay attention that that matches up with what is on the label. And almost, whilst you said that you don't want someone to police it externally, I think if the guild is putting their name to it, they are endorsing that description. And I think you've just got to make sure that what you're saying isn't what you want it to be, but it is actually what is in the bottle, and that people won't be misled or they won't feel that it's disjointed in any way. It's got to literally go through and be succinct throughout every aspect, through the liquid, through the branding, through this bar chart. And to some degree, I think the brands themselves may almost be too close to the liquid to make that judgment call, because I think you're so involved and you so know what you want it to be like that you might almost just need someone else to take a step back and go, that's what it is, that's what you want it to be, but is that actually coming across to the end consumer? Is that what they're going to find?
I think it's a good comment, and it's something that we have talked about for a couple of years. The issue to me is, if you put the Gin Guild logo on it, does it look like the Gin Guild have offered you the opinion, or is it the brand owner, even if you put underneath it information supplied by the brand owner? We as the Gin Guild do not have a secretariat of people sitting in the back room, sampling gins and giving our view of what it tastes like. And it was interesting when I saw some of David's examples at the difference that I felt between some of the liquids and some of the words.
Yeah.
Certainly in the two words, everybody wanted to be soft, but actually wasn't. Some were spicy, and so I think that there is, if we decide to go with it, and this is a proposal at this stage, I think there is some work by the companies using it to be able to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah.
And your point about wanting to be something but not being that something, I think, is entirely relevant. So that if it comes out, I suspect it will come out with a user manual. But I think that the ambition still remains relevant and consistent.
Yeah.
And I think that as Nicholas was telling me the other day, there are 2,000 distilleries in the US making gin and 200 in the UK. And Tesco are not building any more shelves. So, there is a fundamental issue about how this industry communicates with its consumer base, which is not being addressed.
Yeah.
This is an attempt to address it, and I think it behoves on all of us to try and come up with a solution. If this is not the solution, then what is it? And I think this is the perfect forum for that discussion today.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth opening up the conversation. I think that's it's good to have that starting point at least.
Before we go to Nate as looking from the bar side of things.
Yeah, well, I'm all for it. no offence. Because in our bar, we've got a bar in the city there, and we've probably 300 gins, I don't know. But we won't list brand names. The way we operate is born out of the same frustrations that I guess these tags are born out of. We very actively discourage our consumers from coming in and name calling or brand calling a gin, because it doesn't make sense, because people will order it based on the wrong choices. You can have people that are obsessed with a particular gin. I'll not name it. No, I can't name it. And they'll come in and they'll smell it, and if you give it to them blind, they'll be like, "Oh, I don't get any cucumber or rose in that." And so so there is a problem there. So what we try and do, like we're obsessed with the idea of value and the confirmation bias that comes with that. So we try and train our team as best as we can. It's not perfect, but as best as we can to understand the flavour profiles in all of these gins. We don't pay that much attention to the botanicals, as was said earlier, about what does Angelica taste like. We just try and work on that flavour profile. So as when a guest comes in, and they say, "Oh, I'll have a gin and tonic," and they'll say, "What kind of gins do you do?" I'm like, "Don't go there." And we say to them, "What sort of thing are you after? Do you want something fresh, or do you want something floral, or something citrus?" Very similar to the wording that's used on this. And when the guest goes, "Oh, I'll have something citrusy," and our team know a citrusy gin, and they deliver a citrusy gin, and the guest enjoys a citrusy gin, and it's with the right garnish and everything screams citrus at them, that added value is fundamental to how we run the bar. If you don't have that confirmation bias, it's a bit of a damp squib, no one really enjoys it. And referring back to your point there, because that is the pitfalls, I completely agree. I mean, look at that 9 Moons one. I mean, they put 0 at spice. It's like, oh, if I give that to one of my consumers in the bar, all they would say is spice. If you said to them, "Oh, but it's quite lime," they'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, I do get that," but I guarantee you they'd be, because they would confuse wood and spice. So you've got to be very careful. But the danger there is, or the risk there is with the brand. And if the brands have created this world where marketing is more important than flavour, then I guess if this comes in, then they've made their bed and they should lie in it, really. Ooh, tough crowd for that one.
From the technical side, Gavin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Cherry absolutely hit the nail on the head. I mean, those are the key principles, and basically what's been said already is that we have to make sure that the brand owners describe their products accurately, and I think that will take a little bit of time. I don't think we'll do it first time, as we kind of saw with examples there. I mean, we went through an exercise in support of this in applying this scoring method to some of our gins. And the tricky part, I think, was not just scoring against our own little group of products, but thinking that we're actually trying to score these against the whole gin world, basically. So when you're scoring for juniper, it's not just, is this our most juniper or mid-juniper level gin, but how does it compare to everything else that's out there? So I think there will be take a wee bit of back and forward and reviewing. In terms of this working or not, I think if we have a few people who don't quite get it right, I think we can survive that. But if a lot of people, going back to the people, in terms of people using this as a marketing exercise, if we try to use it to make the gins look better than they actually are, rather than describe them the way we want them to be, rather than the way they actually are, then we're just going to lose all trust of the consumers, and the whole thing will just fall apart. We can probably survive a few people doing that and try and fix it, but if a high enough percentage do that, then it's just going to be pretty meaningless. So the calibration exercise is a big piece, and it is probably one of the bigger challenges, I think, in this whole thing. But I definitely see it as a worthy exercise.
If I could just come back on that, I think that one of the things that I've been very impressed with is that the big companies have embraced it. All of the big producers of gin have embraced it, and a number of the sort of smaller people have come on board. So that this is, I suppose, a collective exercise to the benefit of the whole, and therefore we have a shared responsibility to make it work. Now, as I said, we don't have 20 people as a police force to be able to do it, but the question still remains: is how do you weed out the people who don't get it quite right?
I think that's kind of the responsibility of the individual brand owners, and in terms of like the smaller distillers, I think there's a lot of incentive for them to get it right, because basically it all comes down to, it's a bit like what you were talking about earlier with the peaty whiskey. If people expect something and they buy the bottle and it's not what they expected, then they're not going to buy it again. They're probably going to tell their friends how bad it is, but just because it's not what they're expecting. So if there's a big incentive to actually describe your product accurately, and if you're not sure how to do that, I think once we get this up and running, once you've sort of scored your product, done your best amongst your own team of experts or the owners, is to then go out and look for similar gins with similar scoring, just as an example of what might be done, and see, you know, you've scored your juniper as a 7 or an 8, see what else is out there at 7 or 8, does it compare, or have you, as someone really sort of got it wrong and then reassess it sort of thing. So I think there's a wee bit, once we get this up and running, that they'll help support the smaller distiller and the new starts. But meanwhile, I think a lot of us are going to have to sort of really have a bit of reviewing and back and forward to try and get it right in the first place.
For me, one of the tricky bits, and it's just so hard because the entire project is we're trying to quantify flavour perception rather than actual flavour. We're not going, this is your recipe, you've got X amount of juniper, X amount of floral notes in there by weight or anything. So it's every individual, there's so many variables by the end of it, so it is just trying to, as you say, sort of compare things to get a broader idea of that we're all on the same page when we go, oh, this is citrusy, and we go, oh, I didn't get citrus at all. Like trying to come up to almost like a standard, but
it's not a
it's
perfect
so tricky.
system, but it's also worth remembering that this isn't replacing labels, I suppose, as well. You know, I mean, you can. It's an additional tool to what the marketing already is.
And again, there are the descriptors and the website links and everything. I mean, I think this just tries to stop it from being a complete lucky dip to actually having some sort of guidance, some sort of navigation method.
And I think also that from a consumer perspective, if we're trying to bring people into the category, I mean, I remember in the sort of 80s and 90s there were only 3 gins, so you know, you pretty much, and 2 of them tasted almost exactly the same. But you know, now there is so much out there that if you want people to come in, you've got to give them a simple way in, and to give them the confidence that what's in the bottle is not too scary. I think, you know, to me, coriander is one of the interesting ingredients, because if you cook, you know a bit about coriander, but often you don't know the lemony notes of coriander. So if you put on an ingredients label on the back of your gin, it's got coriander in, what should I expect as a consumer of that? So there's an education, I think, in the way that brand owners label and talk about taste on labelling per se, but also this is hopefully will be a tool that allows them to work with that as well.
I certainly think it's good to have a visual aspect rather than just expecting people to read something or not, or that sort of takes away any initial misinterpretation, because if you can literally see it in front of you, that does help. But the other thing that I kind of feel is a risk that might be run is that everyone's going to overstate their juniper, because everyone wants to be, I'm really juniper-y, and I kind of think that when you then taste it, you're not necessarily going to get that. I think that's just the one aspect of it, I think, in those categories might be a bit of a...
But again, that's where you're setting your consumer up for disappointment if you do that.
But interestingly, on those samples that went up, I noticed a number of people had actually dialed their juniper back. They put other things in front, which irks her. Right, so shall we go to the floor? Stephen, yeah.
Frankly, most people who think about juniper think about gin. I mean, just basically, if you know what gin smells like, it smells of juniper. One of the issues about qualifying juniper is that some gins are very piney and resiny, so part of the qualification may be some of that. But all of these things are about compromise. If you start to compromise the simplicity of the communication, do you start to dent its credibility? And the point is, if you had to describe what juniper tasted like on a bar chart, you'd lose the simplicity of it. But if you said piney, anybody who makes gin would go, oh, it's not piney, it's juniper-y. You know, so is juniper piney or is piney juniper-y? I don't know. It is, I think, the catch-22 of the project. And Gavin, you know, has an excellent lab. Ken's here. They've been working in gin since God was a small boy. When they look at their gin and grade it, so this is not Mark and his marketing folk, it is the guys who are looking at it and trying to grade it in a 10-point bar. They're coming up with their opinion. Now, they could submit it to a panel who would give their opinion. But what would happen if it disagreed with the Diageo in-house opinion? Who's right? And to you could do, and it is something that one could do, but then you would have to charge a fee for that process. So you then saying, right, it's going to cost you 100 quid, 1,000 quid, what is the right fee to be able to get your gins graded in this way? So it is a gate that we have considered when I don't think we're set up for it. Part of this process is, I think, for brand owners to say, do they feel confident that they can grade their own gins in an accurate way? The way that often IT, when it's released, is released the initial version, then comes back with the things that are right and wrong with it, and so that's why you never buy an Apple product first time off. One of the temptations with this was to try and work it in-house so much that we came up with a series of conclusions that were right for us, but we didn't populate it with a group. So I think that's a really good idea, but it would mean that, say, that every time you wanted a gin note, the brand would have to submit 100 samples, which would be sent out to your panel, and the panel would come back.
Yeah, but I think you don't do that. You allow companies to submit. The end user, the end consumer, can go onto an app or a website and they can say, yes, fantastic, really love this gin, completely agree with the classification. Or they can say, no, I don't agree with this. I don't think this has got spice in it, I think this is more herbal notes. And if there's enough objection, or you could do enough objection or not enough positive, then it's an unconfirmed classification.
This concept of gin trolls.
Why did you look at me? You could go the other way as well, and because it is subjective that you're trying to put a score on here, and you could say that it's been graded by our master distiller, and it's his opinion, and that's what you're putting on it. Because then, if someone disagrees with it, they can disagree with the master distiller. That's fine. That's not necessarily disagreeing with the Gin Guild's opinion, because that's how it might come across.
I actually think that's a great idea, and I think if that could even be added as a functionality within the Gin Guild site, when you link to the QR code, if there's something, ask the consumer, do they actually agree with the...
Sort of like a
That's getting them involved.
TripAdvisor comment section.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
To actually make your bar chart, I assume the brands and distillers have to come to the Gin Guild and they'll input it in and make you the actual
They download it from the website.
They download it, because that was my next question as to whether you were printing the badges and the things and whether there was a cost in that, like when you have to buy medal competition stickers and things like that, or if you were just expecting everyone to go and they have access to do it themselves and everyone prints it themselves. And
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as you're a member of the Gin Guild, or if you're not, I think we charge you an embarrassingly large fee, which encourages you to become a member of the Gin Guild. I'm looking at Nicholas when I say this. Modest,
Embarrassing
good
large.
value. We've shown it as a neck tag for the bottle. I think based on most bottle labels at this stage, we wouldn't necessarily see it as being part and parcel of a back label, but I don't think that's inconceivable.
Yes.
Have you had any feedback from the malts on implementation?
From who? Sorry?
From the multiples from the supermarket?
We have talked to one of the supermarkets in an unofficial way at the moment, yeah. And that particular person was very, very optimistic. They were very proud. They said this is really something we're looking for, precisely because, as Justin said, there are another 100 gins coming into the marketplace between now and the end of the year, and the shelf space is, although it's been gins getting a bigger area, it's still pretty limited to try and cover the vast array of what's now available.
Yeah, and doubt stops people from paying for things, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I think the answer is yes. The in principle conversation was that they would welcome it. The specifics about how they would implement it have yet to be discussed. And what we wanted to do was to socialise it with the brands, and then go back to them and say, right, broadly that the industries would like to bring this to you. How can we work it? So we would look to do a couple of tests with different malts, probably not in the summer, at some stage before Christmas, to see whether it worked in the environment, and take it from there. In the same way that we would look to see how it worked in bars or in other environments.
Sorry, yeah.
I think supermarkets is probably where it's needed most. Like, you don't have an experienced bartenders to guide you, through this huge array of bottles. We set up peer review of how we can guide it, but what actually is the benchmark of the London Dry Gin? Like, where do you set GMT? Like, what is the archetypal gin profile? Where should people actually be using that?
Can I leave the stage, please?
No.
You have to benchmark, you have to find the established brands that have been doing it for 100 years and say that is their gin, and then you have to say, this for us is a score of X on Juniper, X on Six, X on Four, and then you say, right, I like the idea of the untapped app thing, we go, I think it's 4-star, but you have to train the people, so yes, also a qualifying yes, because that qualification, it's a tough gig to do that, to say, I give this out of 100 or whatever, so much. So you need that, like, at least 3 or 4, 5 when you benchmark gins according to our gin. When you use the SWRI, say, right, we give this score X out of Juniper, say, right, within the context of what we've just shown you, what do you score this gin, and then introduce the new stuff. So it's lots of people that have been trained. You can do that long distance, that's what it is.
I think at the heart of the question is, what's the profile that represents a London gin, London dry gin? And I think that what we haven't attempted to do is to look at the whole conundrum of categorisation. So if you were to say to me, what is the profile of a Western gin? I would answer West London or, Western United States. I have no idea, and I think that often competitions create categories to suit themselves rather than to suit the reality of what's being produced. So I think that for the next windmill to charge at, that might be it, but it's not as part of this, and I'm not sure that categorisation actually helps. I don't know whether it helps you sell gin.
No, it doesn't. We don't at all. Like I said, we don't go into brand calling. We try and encourage people to have a conversation with them. And it's something, was it a Ginposium a while ago I was speaking at, and one thing that was banded around was craft at the time. Still, no one has asked for a craft gin. People don't ask for craft. It doesn't, in a bar environment, and that's what I'm talking about here, no one has used the word craft. They don't ask for a London Dry. They don't ask for any other, I wouldn't even think they ask for an Old Tom. It's all flavour profile first and foremost.
Sorry, yeah. Yep.
I'm not a distiller, but I have worked all my life in the beer industry, and I recognise this debate from the beer industry and the explosion of fantastic beers that have come from small brewers and growing massively. We worked on a programme to try and demystify some of the styles and taste and smell and taste through a website and through a collaborative piece, which there may be some learns in it, because our big breakthroughs when we actually started to engage with the consumer and started to better understand what the consumer was looking for rather than what the industry was trying to portray. And the momentum was gathered by working with the supermarkets and the big on-trade buyers by seeking what it was that they were looking for. And we then managed to capture 80% of the UK beer production within one scheme. And that's since rather homegrown, but it's now being allocated to teenagers left home to go up. So there may well be some learns and we'll be happy to share them.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just kind of leading on from that, I mean, once we get this up and running and then sort of working form, I'd like to see us actually getting some feedback from the consumer, because when the consumer's no longer just taking the lucky dip that we talked about, and they're actually going out and purposely buying the products that they can recognise they want, and we, in terms of sales figures, we should start getting some feedback in terms of where the consumer actually wants to go in terms of the different gin characters. So that should be a good thing as well.
The descriptors you have on the bars, on the bar chart, is that something you're going to have on there all the time? Or are those sorts of bell pepper and then mango chili, is that an optional thing? Is that supposed to class the dominant flavor in the gin?
Yeah, I think one of the issues about calling everything citrus is what do you actually mean? You know, so it's citrusy, but the citrus we have is orange or kumquat or whatever. So it gives the brand the opportunity of owning some of the flavour profiles in that particular gin. And it's up to them to be able to put it in the bar. And the reason we encourage people only to use the large bars is because those are hopefully the dominant flavours that are coming out of the gin.
And then my other question is for maybe more Nate and sharing with the consumer. Do you find people use more adjectives instead of those like particular flavor components they're looking for? So I'm wondering, like under juniper, could you use something like a fresh juniper or tiny juniper and things like that to help the consumer? They don't have that same language that we do. And sometimes, you know, two combinations together, you have lime and strawberry, it's like tastes like coconut or something. We use that up there to help the consumer really know what the gin tastes like. I want people to call it full banana, and it's not a bad thing, but there's no full banana.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'll just really quickly on that. You're right. The guests don't use particular. They don't come to us and go, "I'll have a lemongrass." But if they say citrus through the conversation and we deliver it and it's garnished with lemongrass and we tell them there's lemongrass from the botanicals, that's the light bulb moment for them. That's where they get their value.
Right, well, I'm afraid we've got to draw this to a close. There will obviously be at lunch and later this afternoon. Everybody's here. Justin, you're chained to your office, aren't you, today? You can't leave this. This is your office, did you not?
No. Yes, this is my gig today.
But by all means, come and talk to any members of the board, the Gin Guild. Christopher Heyman's there. He's the real test. If we can get it past him, we know that we're on a winner. There's myself, there's Justin, Anne Brock's over there, Dan from Cotswold. We'd all be delighted to talk to you about it and hear a bit more. Thank you very much for your input now. This is an ongoing project. I think we've got the germ of something which should hopefully work. So thank you very much.